Hello everyone, welcome to the video. Today I will be sharing with you my journey of studying the Skyhook solution from Aeon Essays. So let's start it. First of all, the video is gonna be quite long, so you have to bear with me. So let's start the Skyhook solution. The space junk surrounds Earth, posing a dangerous threat, but there's a way to turn debris into opportunity. Okay, let's go into the real one. Essay. Every human-made object sent into orbit around Earth will meet a fiery death. Okay. It will fall out of the orbit and promptly eradicated. Eradicated means eliminated or destroyed by our atmosphere, or else it will be left dead in an orbital graveyard of decommissioned spacecraft, destined to pollute our exosphere and slowly but surely follow the same sacrificial path back to our home planet. So, the let's say the starting idea of the passage is first of all that there are spacecrafts. So the spacecrafts might be destroyed by our Earth's atmosphere, which might be possible and makes sense also. The second one is it will be left unattended or uncared about. So it will be like a dead body for which no one cares, and yeah, the spacecraft will be there without receiving any attention. Okay, so we get it. There are two ways to deal with it. The first, most more violent choice is preferred when the life cycle of a spacecraft ends and is formally decommissioned. Its mere presence in orbit is a hazard. Okay, so if the spacecraft is left as it is, it causes a problem. That's what the passage is suggesting. To sustain it would be costly. Required resources include labor force to follow its study and movement. So people have to study it, people have to take care of it, and which is useless. Actually, the spacecraft which is useless, and people need to be hired to take care of it, its movements, its path, trajectory, everything else. So but to what end, to what extent should we do this? This is a waste of time. Actually, the author is suggesting that this is a waste of time. That's what the author is saying. And the effort would be a greater would be greater for crafts that have been up there for years, if not decades. Okay, so because the technology would already be outdated, so we don't need them, but we still have to take care of them. Governments and investors legitimately question preserving stations and satellites instead of investing in development of new ones. So okay, so the governments and investors do not want space satellites to be left dead or destroyed. They want it to be sustainable, to make spacecraft in such a way that it can be used in the future even if it is outdated. So yeah, it makes sense because the persons who are putting money into the spacecraft need their money back or need some value out of it. Such discussions took place last year regarding the Hubble Space Telescope, which is a spacecraft, we can understand, which narrowly escaped decommissioning. Decommissioning means discontinuing. Following the successful launch and operation of the James Webb Space Telescope, which probably has a greater or a more advanced technology, I should say. But if such an object is left for dead in space without supervision and direction, it eventually becomes debris, threatening uncontrolled metal that could crash into other functional crafts, including inhabited one. Inhabited means people are living inside there. So yeah, the spacecraft which are left unattended can cause a lot of problem to the newly launched spacecrafts. That the author is suggesting that the size of the debris would not matter. Even a small speck could be enough to cause a catastrophic collision. Okay, the small part of let's say previous satellite can cause a problem for a new one. So in 20, this is an example. So these are the previous all things are just idea, and in 2016 this is the example starts here. In 2016, such a spec was enough to chip at the window of the, so this actually happened, yeah, of the International Space Station's cupola module. So a part of the International Space Station was being damaged, not entirely damaged, but a minor damage occurred. If it had been any larger than a centimeter, okay, it could have penetrated in the shields of the station's crew modules. Okay, got it. The threat is ever growing. As of July 2023, the North American Aerospace Defense Command was tracking more than some amount of space objects, and that number concerns only objects of significant size. Okay, so they are not looking into the smaller spacecraft, not aircraft. Furthermore, the low Earth orbit harbors a multitude of space debris pieces accumulated over the 65 years of space mission. Okay, so since there are a lot of space missions and programs, a lot of debris is being collected in the Earth's orbit. Got it? Including defunct satellites, blah blah blah, and miscellaneous debris, activities like stage separation, etc. A dead Soviet spy satellite and a used Soviet rocket stage came within 6 meters of each other in January this year. Okay, so two satellites came too close. Maybe one of them was discontinued. Maybe, I don't know about it. A full on collision between those two objects would have created thousands of dangerous new pieces of debris. Okay, so a collision can cause a lot of harm even in the future. It can pose a lot of harm in the future. So yeah, as of 2020, 8,000 metric tons of debris are estimated to be in orbit, a figure that is expected to increase. Obvious, because space programs are increasing. With no concrete plan yet for cleaning up this debris, controllers have no choice but to maneuver spacecraft when potentially hazardous debris approaches. So we understand the idea of the passage, right? So there are a lot of space programs, and the spacecraft which are not being used right now are being left discontinued or unattended, which can cause problem to the newer space program rockets or other spacecrafts. So this can cause a lot of problem, and it pollutes the Earth's orbit, right? So this is the main idea of the passage as far as I'm concerned. So let's look at the next paragraph. I've been studying. So this is about the author. I've been studying the problem for years given my background in architecture. So, the author is an architect, probably. With a focus on space structures, I have started by envisioning lunar bases. Envisioning means picturing lunar bases and extraterrestrial habitats. Every blueprint I created was tailored to a specific lunar landscape. Okay, the author did some research and did some, let's say, blueprinting. He did some designs actually. At the heart of this pursuit was development of construction techniques grounded in technology that we could deploy now. Okay, and this is basically the continuation of previous idea. However, as I dive deeper into the practicalities of this project, a formidable conundrum unfurled. So a thing appeared, probably. One that transcends the realm. Transcends refers to go beyond of the realm of architecture and the intricacies of space exploration at large. So the author tried to basically the summary of this paragraph would be the author tried to make some designs to maybe make a sustainable spacecraft, but the author realized that there is something he needs to care about, which is more superior, or which is far more unnoticed, that transcends the thought of architecture, and it actually echoes, which means it actually calls upon the intricacies of space program. So there is something which is unnoticed by the author, which he has realized right now. Okay. The quandary revolved around the complex logistics of ferrying essential materials across the cosmic expanse. Okay, quandary means problem, I hope so. Revolved around the complex, so there is a complexity in carrying things across the space. Okay, the crux of the matter, crux means summary, of this matter extends beyond architectural innovation. So the main point is not architecture, it's actually something else, encompassing the critical challenge of establishing an enduring means sustaining, and reliable connection between our home planet and this distant extraterrestrial outpost. Okay, while using resources on the moon for some of the construction holds a promise, a stable tether to Earth, tether means a connection to Earth, remains essential throughout each habitat's life cycle. Okay, so a connection is important. Not only the architecture matters, but a connection between extraterrestrial objects and the Earth is also an important thing to consider about. That's what I have understood. This multifaceted puzzle spurred an alternative avenue of investigation. Okay, the author realized something else. One that combines engineering ingenuity with sustainable principles to tackle the mounting predicament of space debris. So, there is a way to tackle this problem. What if the tether could be the space debris itself? Okay, now I've understood the entire thing. The author wants to say that instead of designing new things, new way of building spacecraft, we can actually use the space debris to create a connection between Earth and other extraterrestrial objects by which we can save our future spacecrafts or future space program, because it is a considerable problem. The first reason to halt the creation of space debris is the inherent wastefulness of the practice. As it stands, traditional rocket launches are significant impediment. Impediment means a barrier, probably, to sustainable space exploration. Okay, the traditional methods are not correct. That's what the author is saying. Even supposedly reusable tech, for instance, SpaceX Falcon 9 is unsustainable. Okay, even the newest technologies are not following the objective. Not just wasting fuel, but rocket stages that are cast off into the Earth's orbit and the payloads themselves. Okay, so right now also people are not considering about the future of space or the Earth's orbit, the pollution which we are calling. The space launch industry produces fewer atmospheric emissions than aviation. Okay, means the airplanes cause more harm, or airplanes or helicopters cause more harm compared to space, because we know that space programs are costly and happen fewer than aviation industry. Okay, and we get that, and perhaps that has contributed to lack of urgency. Okay, we know. However, this comparison can be misleading. Okay, there's something else, because rockets release pollutants at higher altitudes. Okay, maybe this is more harmful than releasing pollutants at lower altitudes, probably, potentially leading to longer lasting atmospheric effects. Okay. There is also the concern that carbon particles from rocket emissions might inadvertently contribute to the geoengineering of Earth. Okay, so there is a concern rising for the space industry, absorbing heat and exacerbating climate change. Okay, so exacerbate matlab means sorry, ex- supporting. Black carbon emissions from rockets have nearly 500 times the heat trapping capability of other sources of soot combined, intensifying. Basically, the author is explaining what's happening right now. Current rocket launches, whether reusable, horizontal, or traditional, all rely on the same propellant, collectively releasing around 1 gigagram of black carbon into the stratosphere each year. With launches projected to increase, it will probably increase. This annual amount could surge to 10 gigagrams within a few decades. Okay. So the author is saying we need to be concerned about the problem which we are seeing, which the author is saying. We are just reading it. And with launches increasing, a greater number may fail. Okay, so a greater number of rockets or spacecraft will fail to escape the Earth's orbit, which is possible. Even if the percentage of failures stays the same. Okay, so even if the percentage stays the same, let's say there's a 10% failure rate. So for 10 spacecrafts, one of them will fail, and for 100, 10 of them will fail. So 10 is always greater than 100, and in the future, obviously, 10 will be converted to 100. Okay. As long as crewed missions with astronauts are meticulously prepared and safeguarded, catastrophic events are exceptionally rare. Okay. However, the same cannot be said for commercial missions. Okay, got it. Between 2000, basically the author is explaining what is happening. We don't need to carefully care about the these things. These are the facts. The author is just showing proof of what's happening. This is not the main idea. The main idea, we got it, that there are spacecrafts and they are causing problem. The way to tackle it, the author is discussing, and probably in the future of this essay, we will get to know about it. Okay. As long as let's read it once again. As long as crewed missions with astronauts are meticulously prepared and safeguarded, catastrophic events are exceptionally rare. So for space programs, these catastrophic events are rare. However, the same cannot be said for commercial missions. Okay, now I get a point that for commercial missions, astronaut safety is not a big concern. Between two, not only astronaut, the spacecraft also. But between 2000 and 2016, almost 1 in 3 small satellite missions failed. Okay, that's a huge number. With the rate increasing uh, as yearly launches rose. Okay, those missions, those failed missions contribute to the quantity of space debris in a steady way. Obviously, if we launch more satellites and they fail 1 in 3, it causes a lot of problem. Could we recycle all this space trash and use it once again? In the modern sense, recycling is inexorably bound to the concepts. So recycling is bound to the concepts of sustainability, dwindling reserves, whatever it is, ecological destruction, essentially. So these are the factors which determine recycling. Blah blah blah. Right, Victoria Sainsbury of someone, two experts in archaeology and the history of art. Okay, so they are saying something that these are the factors which determine um, recycling. But it's also an ancestral practice driven by necessity and symbolism. Okay, so symbolism and necessity are also a part of recycling. They are suggesting that those two people. Artifacts made from stone, minerals, mortar, textiles, pottery, and bones demonstrate physical reshaping and repair, embodying the practical use of same material. So, the author gives some example of recycling. While materials like metal and glass, which can be melted and recast, may not visibly display these changes, they too have been subject to invisible recycling over centuries. Okay, so metal and glass are also being recycled, but we cannot see it or we cannot feel it. Let's say I'm giving an example, like the author. The two-wear shoes, many of them are from recycled plastic, so you don't notice while you're wearing those shoes. So yeah, the author is saying the same thing. Like for metal and glass, we don't usually see the recycling behind it, but for other things like mortar, textiles, we usually see that. Okay. Such objects change the purpose and use throughout each iteration and rebirth, and the symbolism or history behind them is usually isn't factored in. So the symbolism and the other things, let's say the symbolism and the history, is not a factor for this recycling, the material recycling. For the other things such as mortal, let's say I'm recycling an art, let's say the Mona Lisa. So symbolism is a factor in that thing. So that's what the author is saying. The symbolism only acts in certain cases, not all of them. Okay, hopefully you understood what I'm trying to say. Spolia, the Latin word for spoils, are defined as architectural fragments taken out of their original context and reused in a different context. Okay, essentially pieces of structures transplanted into different structures. Okay, so let's read it again. Defined as architectural fragments taken out of their original context, used in different. Okay, like metal, it can be used in an art and also making a car. I guess that makes up for it. An example of unintentional uses of spolia is the mausoleum at something following its burial due to the earthquake. We knew that earthquake happened in Turkey. Both the Knights of Saint John and the Turks, so there are two kinds of people who later settled in the region after the earthquake, viewed the former monument. So this monument, the author is talking about this one, former monument as a convenient source of construction materials, using spolia to build castles and houses respectively. So this contains symbolism, as the author is saying, because we are using uh, monuments debris, because a monument contains a lot of culture, a lot of other things, religious practices, maybe more things which we don't know about. So this contains symbolism, or it contains a meaning or a reason apart from just recycling. Occasionally, the specific fragments and artifacts were intentionally selected, yeah, see, for symbolic meaning. For instance, the Ark of Constantine in Rome, sections of sculptures originally dedicated to Marcus Aurelius and Trajan were incorporated to symbolize the comparable greatness of Constantine. Okay, so something happened in Rome, and people used recycled materials to symbolize certain things that in Rome. The author is giving an example. We don't have to dive deep into it. That's just an example for the bigger idea. Similarly, during the Byzantine era, it became common to repurpose columns from ancient Greek temples and integrate the same thing. The same example, not the same one, but a similar kind of example. So, into churches symbolizing religious practices. Preserving the history of space exploration is a powerful reason to keep old space structures intact. Back in 2007, the Chinese military used ground-based missile to hit and destroy its aging satellite while in orbit. The anti-satellite test created more than 10,000 pieces of debris, so it was not very good. Of debris orbiting Earth, which with about 2,600 of them were more than 10 centimeter across. Blah blah blah. In 2009, the abandoned Russian satellite, the similar example in a different place. 2251 collided with a working satellite deployed by the US telecommunication, incorporating iridium, resulting in massive. So, this destruction of spacecrafts are also not helpful to the humanity. That incident, together with 2007 Chinese test, is responsible for the majority of space fragments currently hurtling around Earth. So, these two incidents shaped the future of the Earth's orbit's pollution. Okay. Now, the crafts relics of an important these crafts are the relics of an important and fascinating past are shattered into bits. So these important historical events are being shattered into bits, and it also causes pollution. So these are two bad things. Preserving such structures instead would provide insight into the space race, the Cold War, global politics, government. So these spacecrafts provide a lot of historical, religious, and even a lot of other context. So by destroying it, we are not doing a very good job. And the interconnected story of generations as tangible links to significant milestones in space as tangible links to significant milestones in space exploration, they offer a window into the triumphs, challenges, and endeavors that have shaped humanity's journey beyond our home planet. Okay. These space remnants offer a multifaceted narrative about the human exploration of the cosmos and our values here on Earth. Okay. So, this destruction tell a lot of other facts as well. At the same time, polluting space with debris tells a different story. The tale of a consumer-driven throwaway culture with little perspective of its own legacy, intelligence, or drive. So the author is strongly supporting the sustainability and preserving space structures instead of just throwing them away, not caring about them or destroying them. Okay. So this paragraph is just about that. The author's support. The author is angry about the destruction and not caring about the spacecrafts. As we venture back into space exploration, the idea of recycling has significant obstacles. Okay, to overcome. So there are obstacles to space recycling. We know that launching equipment and supplies into low Earth and geostationary orbit comes with a it is costly, hefty price tag. And adding recycling equipment to the mix only adds the expense. So it's expensive. Furthermore, recycling materials into the microgravity environment entails unique technical challenges and risks. So there are scientific challenges also, means real world challenges to do this. Despite these hurdles, the motivation is there. Okay, so maybe research is going on. The European Space Agency, for example, has recognized, potential for recycling technologies and in space, and is exploring circular economies beyond the Earth atmosphere. Okay, so the European Space Agency is looking into this matter, and they want to create um, sustainable spacecrafts. The main idea is sustainability. Sustainability means the idea of keeping one thing alive for a long period of time. The main focus is in orbits. The main focus is in orbit servicing technology. So they are right now focusing inside the Earth orbit, not outside of it. Geared initially towards a smaller, so they are starting with small and eventually they will go big, which would pave the way for repairing, upgrading, refueling, recycling. The while also the addressing of the growing concern of the space debris removal. Okay, leave it. Northrop Grumman's Mission Extension Vehicle (MEV) program, for instance, involves spacecrafts designed to rendezvous. Okay, the rendezvous means establishing a connection with a dock to a commercial geosynchronous satellite to provide life extension services. Okay, so the author is saying that what if we create a spacecraft with joins with other spacecraft. So the other spacecraft are already present in the Earth's orbit, and the new satellite will join with the help of a dock. That's what the author is saying, probably. Let's see. MEV-1 successfully docked with the 20-year-old satellite Intelsat 901 in 2020, while MEV-2 docked with Intelsat 1002 in 2021. The first practical benefit is the potential reduction in launching new materials from Earth. Okay, we could also save valuable space and weight on spacecraft, enabling longer and more complex missions. So author is actually excited and supporting the idea that we should create spacecraft which can join with other spacecrafts, and it will help. How it will help? Let's see. So this is a video, you can watch it. I will skip it. Soon satellites are expected to carry less fuel and larger instruments. Okay, they will carry larger instruments and less fuel. This is a good thing. The goal is for them to be made of a modular, easy to assemble part. Yes, because they need to be assembled. They need to be joined with some other spacecraft. So they need to be modular, with features that allow service and disposal of worn-out parts in orbit. And for the same reason, that electronics plugs and sockets have standard shapes. Discussions on standardized docking mechanism. Okay, just like we have plugs and electronic sockets in our home, which can through which we can charge different phones, we can use different chargers, we can charge our laptops, our phones. So that's what the author is saying, to make things more general. So yeah, despite the initial promise, extending the life of satellites only offers a temporary solution to the space junk problem. So this is also a point to consider. We do not have to reduce the future space junk, we also have to remove or eradicate, or not destroy, we have to eliminate the space pollution or the space debris which we have created. Okay. Yeah, so despite the initial promise, despite it seeming promising, so it actually does a temporary solution. Okay, we understood that, and merely delays the inevitable, the rapid obsolescence of technology and escalating need for repairs, in which the servicing spacecraft would consume more fuel. Okay, so this is a spacecraft which is already present, and this is a new spacecraft. Let's say this is the spacecraft which is already present, and this is a new one. So this new one have to repair the old one or do something to the old one. This new one also need fuel to go there. So actually the author is saying that this might seem promising, but it also causes a lot of pollution, just like the previous one. It became increasingly clear that the space constructions have finite lifespan under the current approach. Okay, in this context, only a practical option that remains is raw material extraction, salvaging valuable components and material from space debris to fabricate new spacecraft. Okay, just like normal traditional recycling, the author is saying that this can also be fruitful. And also, and once the material is extracted, their carcasses would be discarded into the graveyard orbit once again. Okay, so this is a downside to it. That's what the author is saying. With Mir is a spacecraft, I suppose, will perish a Bible, a Quran. Okay, so let's continue. 11 tons of scientific equipment, more than 100 books left behind, or astronauts, etc., etc. So here, someone is saying, that with a spacecraft discontinuation, we will also discontinue a Bible. We will leave behind a Bible, a Quran, 11 tons of scientific equipment, and lot of other things into the space. We have created these books, this all equipment, but we will leave it. So it's not just the spacecraft; it's also a lot of other things. Okay, personal items, etc., photograph, etc., etc. So these are not the debris um, which we can use to make a newer spacecraft. You cannot make a spacecraft out of a photograph, right? So that's what the author is saying. This not the author. Thus wrote Amelia Gentleman and Tim Radford. Oh, that's a weird name. In the Guardian, so the Guardian published this article. This one, that with spacecraft discontinuation, we will also leave behind a lot of other things which we cannot use for productive things. Russian Space Agency chose to see Mir as a defective and decaying mass of rusting machinery, and as Sergei Garbunov, the agency spokesman, told the paper, okay, so this is about Russian spacecraft Mir. The technology is outdated and we don't have money for repairs. So these are excuses by the spacecraft side. No research is being carried out on board, and recent missions have been devoted exclusively to repairing Mir. So they are saying that um, the time spent to take care of Mir, which is actually a decaying mass, nothing else, which is of no use, is not a point to consider about, right? So the Russians are also correct in their part, but this gentleman, not gentleman, I don't know who are they. So the Guardian actually does not support the entire thing, that Russians should take care of this in a different way. Okay, there, leave it. No research is being carried out on, yeah, so there is no longer any point to me. See what I said. Yet to the public, Mir embodied an era of cosmic. So this is about Mir, era of cosmic achievements, 140 metric tons of intellectual metal. This intellectual quality similarly permeates the very material of the ISS. Its metal has seen more than 250 individuals from 21 countries who have visited, an astounding 269 extravehicular activities conducted as of now. The completion of more than 3,000 experiments while traversing billions of miles in space. Its significance, though, extends far beyond the scientific accomplishments. So, there is a lot of things attached to this spacecraft Mir. Okay, I guess this is a photograph of Mir. You can see this is a very big spacecraft. Yeah, see approach view of Mir space station. Yeah, so it not only is a scientific tool, it also encapsulates a lot of other things, such as in the individuals who worked there, and lot of experiments and the history which is there. Okay, it was the crowning achievement at the beginning. See, it's a important event in the history of humanity. It was the crowning achievement at the beginning of 21st century, the symbol of science, diplomacy, and international collaboration in a post-Cold War world. So this bears a lot of historical importance in the history of humanity, and thus this spacecraft should not be destroyed without a purpose. That's what the author is. That's what the author wants to say. That's not what the author is saying, but I'm feeling what the author is trying to say. Where the space is viewed as the common inheritance of all people. Yeah, this symbolizes that space is common and everyone should have access to that, because it is unexplored and it requires a lot of scientific minds to deal with it. The okay, ISS is the largest artificial object in orbit around Earth, weighing 420 metric tons, and it cost an estimated 150 billion to build and operate. So the author is talking about ISS. Coming back to the next paragraph, it is also expected to be decommissioned in the 2030s. So the ISS will also be decommissioned, unfortunately, to be crashed, in other words, into the spacecraft cemetery. Point Nemo in the Pacific Ocean, the point that is farthest from the land. The ISS annual 3 billion cost coupled with technical challenges in maintenance after the end of the space shuttle program and difficulty of transporting large replacement parts all contribute to the possibility that it will become the biggest source of space junk of all time. So the destruction or the leaving behind of ISS will be a lot of problem, and it will means a space junk is a problem. That's what I'm saying. There's a solution to all of this, a skyhook. Okay, so the author is suggesting a solution, a space structure that could lift materials from Earth to near Earth orbit and beyond. The ability to deal with junk and construct structures in space requires a paradigm shift, one that encourages us to seek opportunities and potential that might otherwise go untapped. Okay, so the author is suggesting a skyhook, which is an unexplored way of dealing with space junk. In this case, the untapped resource is the common denominator shared by all space objects we have created, mass. So the author wants to say that there is something positive about mass in the space, abundant spacecraft that we can look forward to. From the early days of meticulous payload calculations to the present, accumulation of mass in Earth's orbit could be a surprisingly valuable asset. So, the author is saying that what we consider to be debris or junk can actually be valuable. How? Let's see. Consider the sheer complexity and expense of sending objects into space. Rockets, with their massive fuel requirements and substantial failure rates, still face a formidable challenge to reach orbital altitudes. So, these rockets requires a huge amount of effort, and it also fails, and it is very challenging for them to escape Earth's orbit. Moreover, the presence of manufactured space objects in orbit comes with another advantage, control. Okay, so the author says that we can control the upcoming spacecraft. So that's a positive thing about it. Unlike natural objects like asteroids, whose orbits could be unpredictable and chaotic, the objects we have generated can be precisely positioned and tracked. Okay, so author is saying that these are under our control, so we can use it to our advantage. So yeah, with control over these their orbits, we can predict collisions, optimize trajectories, and avoid potential hazard. Okay, makes sense. Envisat. Okay, so this is an example. Envisat, for example, one of the Earth's Earth observation satellites ever launched with a length of 26 meters. Blah blah blah. Ceased communication in 2012 and transformed into one of the largest pieces of space junk in orbit. So just like ISS is going to be. Its trajectory is still being closely monitored by us. Okay, so maybe there is a positive thing about this Envisat. Envisat has the potential to become a linchpin, okay, a support for the next step in space flight. Non-rocket space launch system like a Skyhook, which could require anchor massive. So this Envisat, even though it's abandoned, it actually can serve as a potential positive thing, or what the author says is a linchpin or a let's say anchor to something, or a tail rotor to something. We will figure it out. The idea of a skyhook has been under study for half a century now. Okay, for 50 years, it would take the form of a long, strong tether extending from a base station Earth surface into space. Okay, so the Envisat will serve as a support for other spacecraft. How? Let's see. The other end of tether, a counterweight like Envisat would remain in orbit around Earth. Sorry. As the tether rotates, the counterweight generates a centrifugal force creating tension in the tether. Tether is supposedly a connection. Okay. Supposedly, I don't completely know about it. But let's see. Spacecrafts and payloads can be attached to the tether. Okay, it's an attachment and released into space when they reach desired velocity, essentially hooking them into the orbit. So the author is saying that we can use abundant space aircraft, attach a tether to it, and there are new aircraft, spacecraft, and there are payloads which we remove from the spacecraft, and those payloads can be hooked with this mass, and with the help of a tether, and they can be taken out of the orbit, probably because that's what the problem which is being addressed. The counterweight's substantial mass and fixed position in space would act as a pivot point for the entire system, allowing the tether to maintain tension and transfer momentum. Okay, scientific terms. Depending on the tether's length, material, and the specific rotational characteristics of the skyhook, momentum it imparts to the payload could potentially extend their reach beyond Earth's orbit to reach other celestial. See what I've said. So the tether can attach itself to the NVSAT and then attach the other payloads and take it out of the Earth's orbit, so that the Earth's orbit remains without pollution for the next few years. Okay, so yeah. Further into the future, skyhooks could span across three celestial bodies: Earth, the Moon, and Mars. So yeah, forming a seamless interconnection. So yeah, so tether is not a singular thing. The author is suggesting there can be a network of tethers, and there can be more than one tether: tether 1, tether 2, tether 3, 4, 5, 6. The interconnected network of tethers. That's what the author is saying. See, the you can visualize it in the picture. So yeah, the rocket is flying by, and see this is the payload. So the payload will be detached from the rocket, and after that, this tether, this entire thing is in no what NVSAT. NVSAT, and this small thing which is protruding out is the tether, and it will capture the payload, and then see the tether loses tosses payload to higher orbit. So it will remove the payload away from the Earth's orbit. It will take it out from the Earth's orbit. In 2000, Boeing conducted the hypersonic airplane space tether. Okay, so this has been done. The study has been done, which investigated the feasibility of using a skyhook to launch payloads into orbit. So yeah, research has been done. The authors of the study stated that we do not need magic materials like carbon nanotubes to make skyhooks tether, and that existing already commercially available material. So we don't need special materials. That's what the author is saying. The main challenges, so there are challenges, but not in case of materials. The main challenges are in design and let's say architecture of the skyhook, and such as ensuring that it is strong enough to withstand the forces. So it needs to be rigid and strong, and forces involved, and that is protected from the effects of atomic. So it should not react with atomic oxygen, or maybe not destroyed by the atomic oxygen. In the follow-up phase, the study concluded that there are no fundamental technical showstoppers to the idea. So we have to research about it. That's what the author is saying. This study was primarily focused on the feasibility of using a skyhook to launch payloads into orbit. Okay, and it didn't delve deeply into specifics of the counterweight. But once we start designing, okay, so author is saying that the research which has been done did not dive deep into the specifics of what we have to do. It's just overview of what we require to do. But once we start design, okay, so once we start doing it, we will figure it out. We will reach a point where the concepts of recycling, cultural preservation, space flight converge into a single comprehensive solution. So we have to work on it in order to come to a solution, concrete solution. The most promising candidate for counterweight turns out to be international space. Okay, the International Space Station, which we will abandon nearing 2030, can be a can be a promising candidate for this counterweight is the big thing, and there is a small connection which is protruding itself out from the counterweight. But marshalling that potential requires several key steps. First, we have to shut down the station for and remove hazardous elements. Okay, so to make it counterweight, we need to remove the hazardous elements and all everything which can cause a problem to that to the creation of the skyhook. So the author is basically mentioning the steps, nothing else. Next, we have to depressurize something. Additional propulsion will be required. Once the ISS is in position, designing attachment points, etc., etc., would be critical. When these points are in place, when this all take place, the skyhook cable could be deployed. Okay, so once all these steps are complete, we can deploy. According to the latest skyhook design, the counterweight must be significant. So these are the counterweight requirements. Significantly, the specifications of the counterweight, you might say. Then the payload, significant larger than the payload. So the bigger thing is the counterweight, and the tether should be smaller than the counterweight, with a minimum ratio of 1000 times the payload size. Okay. So in order to best boost the skyhook's capability to handle larger payloads, additional counterweights such as the defunct satellite might be strategically attached. Okay, to increase the size of the counterweight. So the skyhook contains a counterweight and a tether, which is a connection. So there is a specific condition uh, following which the skyhook will function. So to increase the weight of the counterweight, so this is the condition, the minimum ratio of 1000 times the payload size. So to increase the weight of the counterweight or the size of the counterweight, we can attach more satellites using the dock mechanism, which the author discussed previously. Such as defunct satellite might be strategically attached, effectively increasing its mass. What began as a combination of technologies, so I think this is the ending of the essay. What began as a combination of technological progress and waste, the accumulation of mass in space has now become a valuable asset. The author is basically repeating what he has said. Reshaping the foundation of spaceflight, embracing the untapped potential of space objects, blah blah blah. This shift would guide the conceptualization from bottom up. So bottom up method is nothing but a method in which we design a smaller element first and then we combine them to form a bigger element. And yeah, fostering a new. So the author already previously mentioned that we need to start working on it in order to figure out the bigger problem. And repurposing it within a sustainable and resourceful paradigm of spaceflight, effectively preserving cultural value and transforming our current wasteful system. Clearly, the imminent destruction of the ISS represents a telling decision of our modern ways, as well as missed opportunity to preserve an invaluable historical artifact of human space exploration. So, yeah, the author previously said that ISS was a great opportunity, but we have missed it. We right now cannot. I think we cannot make it space hook. This is not possible right now, and because it's a missed opportunity, and author is frowning upon that. Also, accelerate the progress by integrating retired structures into new systems. We construct a dynamic archive, a living tapestry showcasing our progress in space expansion and enabling exploration of the new world. So, the author basically repeated what he previously said, and we need to be concerned about it. That's what his point is. So, I think this is the end of the video. This was quite a long video, and see you in the next one.